Okay? So on an ellipse, that will be potentially the first equation. Or the second equation looks like x squared over b squared plus y squared over a squared equals 1. Now, just so that you guys know what the difference between those two pieces are, if you look at them, do they not look the same, the equations? The only thing I did was I switched a and b. What you have to know about doing an ellipse like this is that the a is going to be whatever the biggest number is on the bottom. Okay? That's the difference between the two. Okay? The a is going to be whatever the biggest number is on the bottom. So the one thing I want you to notice is that this number, the biggest one, is under which one it's underneath. If it's underneath the x or if it's underneath the y. That's going to make a difference for us when we find our material. So the first thing that you're going to have to find for me are called vertices. Kind of like, it's the plural of vertexes. So when we did the parabolas a couple days ago, do you remember when we found that high and the low spot was at 0, 0 every time? Well, these particular ones are not going to be at 0, 0. It's kind of like the center of the oval will be at 0, 0. The vertices is going to go to whatever one's longest. So on the top one, for instance, the a is underneath the x, right? So this would be plus or minus a, 0. For the bottom one, the vertices will end up being 0 and plus or minus a. Because if you notice, the a on the bottom equation is underneath the y. Does that make sense? So if the bigger number is underneath the x, then the vertices will be in the x. If the bigger number is underneath the y, then the vertices will be in the y. Meaning, you'll go farther on the y or the x, depending on if it's bigger or smaller. Then the second thing that you have is called covertices, which I'm going to abbreviate as covert. Figured as much. And what coverts are going to be the square root of the b's. So for instance, because the b is underneath the y in the first one, that'd be 0 and plus or minus b. And because b is underneath the x's, it's going to be plus or minus b over 0. Thank you. Okay? So I'm going to draw a red line through this just so that you guys know that this is two different parts. All right? It's either the top half or the bottom half. And the last thing that they're going to ask you to find is what we call our foci. Foci, just so that you guys understand, is plural for focus. Do you remember when we found the focus the other day when it came to parabolas? How many focuses were there? 1. This particular one, because we have an elongated oval, they'll have 2 foci, or 2 focuses, because of the fact that you have 2 spots there, not just 1. Okay? Now, the formula for finding them, either one, doesn't necessarily matter, is going to be c squared equals a squared minus b squared. And then depending on which one has the vertices, your foci will be in the vertices. So in the same position. So for this one, the top one, it would be plus or minus the square root of whatever c squared is, 0. And the bottom one would be 0 plus or minus whatever that c is. We don't have to do this square root of c squared. We can just put c, I guess. Okay? Now, the main thing that I want you guys to understand is that every single one of those, either equation is equal to 1. On your problems today, half of them are going to be equal to 1 to start, and the other half is not going to be equal to 1. So we need to make it. Okay? So has everybody got that screen? Okay, So here's what it's going to look like. It's going to say something like x squared over 9 plus y squared over 64 equals 1. That's how the problem is going to look. The directions are going to ask you to graph it, identify the vertices, co-vertices, foci. That's what it's going to ask you to do. So here's what you have to do. I want you to identify, first of all, what number is bigger, 64 or 9?
64.
Good. 64 is bigger. Colton, where's the 64 underneath? What letter?
Y.
Good. That means my vertices are going to be in the y's because 64 is bigger and it's underneath the y's. Now, what I need to know from you guys is, what's the square root of 64? You're half right.
Plus or minus 8.
Plus or minus 8. Because it went into the y's, our vertices are going to be at 0 and then plus or minus 8. If you'd like to split that into two different ones and say 0, 8 and 0, negative 8, that's perfectly fine. But it's easier and faster if you just go plus or minus 8. The smaller of the two numbers, the 9, what's the square root of 9? Plus or minus 3. And those were underneath the x's, so I put them in the x spot. Again, the bigger of the two is going to be your vertices, bless you, and the smaller of the two will be your co-vertices. So again, to get the 8, or plus or minus 8, you square root 64. And to get plus or minus 3, you square root 9. Okay, is everybody okay with that? Now, to find the foci, I want you to square, or not square it. I want you to take 64, first of all, minus 9. What's 64 minus 9? 55. Then I want you to square root that. What's the square root of 55? I'll give you a hint. It doesn't come out evenly. Does the square root of 55 reduce? What times what gives me 55? 11 and 5, and both of those are prime numbers, so can it even reduce? No. So I can leave it as the square root of 55, or some of you were typing it in and you got something like probably 7.3 or 7.4. Is that about right? Okay, because you got the decimal equivalent to that. And there's nothing wrong with that either. First and foremost, are you comfortable with how I got those numbers? Again, to get the last one, what I did was I took the big number, 64, minus the little number 9, and then I square rooted it. Now, as far as graphing it goes, when you graph it, and I'll put it in blue just so you can see it. Since I said the vertices were 0 and then 8 or negative 8, that means I'm going to go up 8 or down 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, make dot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, make dot. I think I counted that right. Right. Good. And then the co-vertices, 1, 2, 3 over, and 1, 2, 3 over the other way. Can you start to see the oval shape? Now, the foci, I'm going to put in red just so that you know. When you did the square root of 55, and some of you guys typed that into a calculator and got 7.3-ish, 4-ish, somewhere in there. If I go up 7.3 and or down 7.3-ish, my foci are going to be right next to those blue dots. Now, from here, all you're going to do is you're going to connect the dots. Not the red dots, but the blue dots into a kind of a surfboard looking thingy or an oval. The way I like to graph it, because it never looks perfect, is I try to do two parabolas. Did you see that? Where I tried to go one parabola and then a second parabola underneath? It's kind of how I like to graph them. I think it's a little bit easier that way. What do you think? That's the whole problem. Okay? Now, the only bad part will be if it's not equal to 1 right away. Like if it were to say 4x squared plus 9y squared equals 36. Is that equal to 1? No. How do I make a 36 into a 1? Divide by 36. And as Colton suggested, if I do it to one side, that means I have to do it to both sides, right? And when you do it on both sides, then you got to do it to every piece when you're over here. So what's 4 over 36 reduced to? 1 over 9. Or x squared over 9. What's 9 over 36 reduced to? 1 over 4. And 36 divided by 36 is 1. One of the nice things that you will find for the most part on the vertices and covertices, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but they're nice numbers. You know what I mean by nice numbers? When I square root 9, do you get a whole number? When I square root 4, do you get a whole number? You haven't been getting any decimals. Could you? Yeah. But most of the time today on this worksheet, you're only going to get ones that are nice and easy for you. Okay? So now, to find the vertices. Is the vertices going to be in the x spot or the y spot? Y and the x, Gabby? It's the bigger number, right? And what's the square root of 9? Plus or minus 3. And it goes in the x location because x is bigger. So then the coverts would have to go in the y's. What's the square root of 4? Plus or minus 2. Then to find the foci. First of all, I take 9 minus 4. What's 9 minus 4? 5. And then I square root it. What's the square root of 5? Well, you guys, the square root of 5 doesn't come out evenly, right? 2.2 some. So for that particular thing, if you leave it as this plus or minus the square root of 5, that's perfectly fine. Now when it comes to graphing it, I have 1, 2, 3 on the x's. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. 1, 2. If I put the foci in there, it's 2 and a little, it's just past the number 2. Just past the number 2. Somewhere in that category. And then I make an oval looking shape. As best you can. Try not to make them look like diamonds. They're supposed to be ovalish. Okay? What do you think? Can you handle it? Again, it's 6 questions. That's all I'm going to give you. Okay, I promise.